Sifat are of two types. The first type of sifat is called sifat lazima. The second type is called sifat arida. Lazima means that those sifat that are there permanently regardless of the harka on the letter or the position of the letter within the word, etc. etc. Sifat arida are those sifat that are there only temporarily. So now sifat lazima is further broken down into two portions. The first portion being mutadadda and the second one being ghayr mutadadda, right? It just basically means mutadadda means the ones that have opposites, right? Opposites. So if there isn't a sifat that is a direct opposite of this sifat, then it's called ghayr mutadadda. But these three that I'm going to teach you now are called mutadadda because they have opposites, right? So the first pair of sifat lazima is what we call hams and jahr. So let's deal with hams first and we move on to jahr. Hams means whisper in Arabic, and it refers to the flowing of air while pronouncing a letter, right? And there's a certain category of letters that belong to hams, and how we remember them is by using the mnemonic فحثه شخص سكت, right? فحثه شخص سكت. Now these letters are all part of hams, and obviously the remaining letters are all part of the opposite of hams, which is jahr, which we'll talk about in a second, right? Now if you want to understand hams correctly, what you need to do is you need to put a sakin on each of these letters and put a alif before and try and pronounce each of these letters and see what happens with the air flowing out of your mouth when you do so. So you say af, ah, ath, and so on and so forth, and you'll see that when you're pronouncing each of these letters, if you put your hand just outside of your mouth, you'll feel the air flowing out, right? And that's the reason why it's called hams, because of the airflow coming out of the letters, right? Now for kaf and ta, these are a bit special because the airflow is not going to be too much airflow. When you're pronouncing kaf and ta, ak and at, it's not supposed to be too much of airflow, and that's because kaf and ta, as well as belonging to hams, they also belong to the second group of sifat, which is shidda, which we'll talk about in a second. Right, now the remaining letters that are not part of this mnemonic, فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتَ, are all letters of jahr, letters that are pronounced without airflow. So jahr in itself means loud, something loud, right? So it means that it comes out when you're pronouncing the sound, it comes out without airflow. So letters like alif itself, right? Letters like ba, jim, dal, dhal, right? So ba, jim, dal, and dhal. You can notice that if you put an alif before any of these letters and you say ab, aj, ad, you'll notice that none of these letters have airflow, right, coming out of them, as well as the letter dhal. Letters like dhal and za, you can feel that they have lengthening of the sound, but not necessarily air flowing out of the mouth when you're pronouncing them. Adh and az, if you put your hand outside of your mouth, you're not going to feel any airflow. You'll feel sound that is flowing there, but you're not going to feel airflow, right? So this is to do with airflow. I'm just going to write airflow here so we can remember it. Now the second group of sifat is talking about the flow of sound, right? So the first group of sifat talked about the flow of air coming out of the mouth. Now we're talking about the flow of sound, so the duration of letters when we're pronouncing them. So there are three possible durations of letters. There's shidda, which is abrupt pronunciation, right? So shidda means hard or abrupt. And then there's the other extreme end, which is rikhwa, which are long letters. And then there's in-between letters, which is called bayniya, right? In-between letters are also referred to as tawassut, right? So you may call them bayniya or tawassut. It just means in-between, right? So these are in-between letters. And there's mnemonics to remember which letters are hard letters, abruptly pronounced, and is mnemonic to remember which letters are pronounced in between, right? And obviously the remaining letters are all long letters. So let's talk about shidda first. We've got ajidu, qatin, bakata. So all of these letters are pronounced abruptly. So again, you put an alif before and you put sakin on the letter, and then you understand how it's pronounced abruptly, right? So aj, ad, aq, at, ab, right? All of these letters that you can notice here, jim, dal, qaf, ta, and ba, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters are all forming part of shidda as well as jahr, right? So they are loud letters, so they pronounce without airflow as well as pronounce abruptly. And the combination of those two sifat, abrupt pronunciation plus no airflow, gives us qalqala, right? Because we must be knowing that qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal are all letters of qalqala. So when you have an abrupt pronunciation without airflow and without lengthening of the letter, then you have qalqala, which is an echo or a bounce that emanates from the position of pronunciation of the letter. Now let's talk about kaf and ta. Right, so I mentioned when we were doing the first two sifat that kaf and ta were a bit special, right? Kaf and ta are both letters of hams as well as letters of shidda. So they are both pronounced abruptly, right? Because of shidda, but they also have airflow to them because of hams. So when you are pronouncing kaf and ta, you must be careful not to lengthen any of the letters, but you must also be careful not to neglect the airflow coming out of the letter, right? So say for example, you have a alif before a ta with a sakin, or you have a alif before a kaf with a sakin, right? This will be pronounced at, right? So you close the pronunciation abruptly because it's a letter of shidda, but after the pronunciation has been done, there's a little bit of airflow that comes out because of the hums, right? At, as well as the kaf. You close the pronunciation quickly, but after the pronunciation has been closed, there's a little bit of airflow that comes out in the end because of the hums. Ak. Now let's talk about letters that are in between letters, right? Bayniya letters. Bayniya letters are 5: Lam, Noon, Ain, Mim, and Ra. Now these letters, we should not lengthen them, nor should we be too abrupt in pronouncing them. We should spend maybe a quarter or half a second pronouncing them, right? So the example that I can give you is An'amta. An'amta. Here we have a noon and a mim that both have sakin preceded by haraka letters. Now what we don't want to do is rush over the pronunciation of the noon and the mim and amda, right? Because that makes it a shidda letter. Also what we don't want to do is lengthen the noon and the mim too long, because when you lengthen the noon and the mim, that is called ghunna, right? So we don't want to say an'amta. So what we want to do is find a middle ground in between there. So we stretch the letters ever so slightly just to give a clear pronunciation. An'amta. Lastly, we have rikhwa, which represents our long letters, also known as soft letters, right? These are letters like tha, ha, as well as ha, even dhal and za, which we talked about in the previous two sifat, right? So look at a letter like tha. Tha forms part of rikhwa as well as part of hums. So when you're pronouncing a letter like tha, you need to ensure that it is lengthened in its pronunciation, and there's also airflow that escapes from your mouth. So ath, it's both lengthened and there's airflow. Look at an example like ha and ha. Ha and ha are both letters of rikhwa as well as letters of hums, right? You can see here's the ha, here's the ha. So when you're pronouncing these letters, same like tha, you need to lengthen them and make sure that there is airflow. Ah, ah. Now look at dhal and za. Dhal and za, we don't see them here in the mnemonic فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتَ as part of hums. So we know they're not part of hums, they're part of jahr, which means there's no airflow that comes out when we're pronouncing these letters. However, they will be lengthened because they are rikhwa letters. So you pronounce a dhal and a za with a lengthened pronunciation, even though there's no air flowing out of your mouth. So az. If you put your hand in front of your mouth, you're not supposed to feel airflow, but you will hear the sound flowing out of your mouth as it is a long letter. The final two sifat are basically empty mouth and full mouth letters, right? So we've got isti'la and istifal. Now isti'la, coming from the word ala, right, means to rise up, right? So that means referring to the back of the tongue rising up towards the palate, creating a fullness in the pronunciation of the letter, right? So these are called rising letters. And istifal, right? Fal kind of sounds like fall. You can remember it like that. When you're falling, you're going down. So the back of the tongue is downwards. So these are empty mouth letters and these are full mouth letters. Now the letters of isti'la can be remembered by this mnemonic khussa, ضغط, qidh. Right? So it's sod, dod, ta, dha. Those are easy to remember because they're next to each other in the alphabet, as well as kha, ghain, and qaf. Okay? Now you can hear the fullness coming out of my mouth as I'm pronouncing these letters. And that fullness is not created by moving the lips, right? The rounding of the lips is only for two things in tajweed. The rounding of the lips is only when you're pronouncing a dhamma or when you're pronouncing a waw. Every other letter or every other occasion, your lips should be relaxed. Your lips should be in a relaxed position, and only the back of the tongue is doing the work as to whether the letter is full or empty mouth. So you need to learn how to control the back of your tongue. The rising and the falling of the back of the tongue, isti'la and istifal, is what controls whether a letter is full or empty. So let's talk about sod, dod, ta, and dha. Right? These four letters actually form part of a subset of sifat, right, which is called itbaq, which we'll talk about soon enough. And these four letters are full regardless of the circumstance. So if it has a fatha and a dhamma, it will be full. If it has a kasra, it will also be full. If it has a sakin preceded by a kasra, it is also full. No matter the circumstance, sod, dod, ta, and dha are always going to be full mouth letters, right? So you can put a kasra on a sod and say si, but it's still going to be full. You can put a kasra on a dad and say di, but it's still going to be full, and so on and so forth, right? However, the other three letters, kha, ghain, and qaf, do not form part of the subset of the category itbaq, right? Which means that when they have kasra, they're going to be a little bit less full than usual, right? So it's not going to be empty to the point of an empty mouth letter, but it's going to be a little bit less full, right? So I give an example. If you say ha with a fatha, it's ha. If you say ha with a dhamma, it's ho, both full. But now if you put a kasra on a ha, it's going to be khi, which is a little bit emptier, right? The same with ghain. If you put a kasra on a ghain, it's going to be ghi. If you put a kasra on a qaf, it's going to be qi. As well as if these letters are sakin, these two letters kha and ghain, right? If they are sakin and they are preceded by a kasra, like inna fi ikhtilafi al-layli, that is going to be empty mouth as well. Example for this one, وَخُذْ بِيَدِكَ ضِغْثًا, right? Because it's preceded by a kasra, it's going to be emptier. Let's look at the letters of istifal now. The letters of istifal are all the letters that don't form part of the category isti'la, right? So there's quite a bit of them. And basically all these other letters are always going to be empty mouth. Now there's a few letters that people often make the mistake of making them full, right? One of them is dhal, the second one is lam, and the third one is mim, right? This is very common that I've noticed amongst especially the new hufad, right? Lam is always an empty mouth letter. The only time lam will be pronounced with a full mouth letter is in the word Allahu. Every other instance, lam is going to be empty mouth, right? So pay careful attention to words like sultan, right? You've got a word like sultan, which has a lam, which is followed by a ta. So you've got an empty mouth lam, which is followed by a full mouth ta. So be very careful not to make the lam full mouth in preparation for the ta. So sin, lam, and noon are all empty. Only the ta should be full in this word. Sultan. Okay, this is just one of the many examples. Another example of the dhal is when we have a word khudu. Right, you have ha and you have a dhal, khudu. This word has a full mouth letter that is followed by an empty mouth letter, and they are both dhamma. So in this case, our mouth is going to be round for the first letter and the second letter because of the dhamma. But the tongue, the back of the tongue needs to be up when we pronounce in the kha as it is full mouth. But the back of the tongue needs to fall down when we're pronouncing the dhal as it is empty mouth. So instead of making them both full, you're going to make one full and one empty while keeping the mouth rounded for both letters. Khudu, khudu. You can hear the distinction between the full mouth kha and the empty mouth dhal. Another example is the meme. The letter meme, when you have a dhamma on the letter meme, say for example you have ha meme joining to alladhi, humulladhi. Right, we must be very careful not to make it humulladhi, making the meme full going into the lam. Both of these letters, actually all of these letters in this word, in these two words, are empty mouth letters. Ha, mim, lam, and dhal are all empty mouth letters. So the back of the tongue needs to be down throughout the entire pronunciation of these two letters. Humulladhina, for example. Okay, so there you have it, right? This is just an outline of the sifat. There are a few more that we will discuss. Bear in mind there are 5 sifat that are mutadadda. I haven't gone through all of them because this is just a basic guide for those who want to better their tajweed, right? And particularly I don't do that because I don't want people to say, okay, I learned this by so and now I'm a qari, right? So this is just basics. Master the basics and your recitation will be greatly improved, inshallah. Let's go through a summary, right? So we first dealt with hams and jahr. Hams and jahr dealt with the air flow coming out of a letter. So hams, meaning whisper, means that these letters have airflow when we are pronouncing them, right? It's outlined here. And jahr, the remaining letters which are not in the mnemonic, فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتْ, these letters are pronounced without airflow. The second, we had 3 categories, right? This is referring to the length of the letters. So we have shidda, which is abrupt length, short length. Ajidu, qatin, bakata. We also had bayniya, which is in between, so not too long, not too short. Lin umara, that is your mnemonic. Lam, nun, ain, mim, and ra. When we are pronouncing these letters, they must be stretched ever so slightly. And then long letters, which are the remaining letters, which are pronounced with a lengthened duration, like tha, ha, dhal, etc. And the final group of 2 sifat dealt with the fullness or flatness of a letter. So fullness or flatness. And we have isti'la on the one side, which are full mouth letters caused by the rising of the back of the tongue towards the palate, not by the rounding of the mouth. And we also have istifal on the other end of the scale, which are empty mouth letters caused by the falling of the back of the tongue down towards the mouth.